This is Ava. Cricket and I have been sitting here chatting over coffee about comfort movies, you know the ones. That go-to film you find yourself returning to again and again. You've watched it so many times you know every line and exactly how it ends, but that's the point. For those 90 minutes, the world feels safe. Today, we're stepping into one of those worlds. Letters to Juliet.
I have a quick question for you to start things off.
Yeah.
When you're looking for serious life advice, and I mean the kind of advice that actually makes you rethink everything, quit your job, or maybe start a business, where do you usually look?
Oh, usually.
Yeah.
Probably the business section of the bookstore.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe a biography of some tech mogul or, one of those really dense books on stoicism.
Right, yeah, you look for something heavy, something that feels like actual work.
Exactly.
We have this sort of built-in bias that if you want profound change, you need profound source material. But today, for this deep dive, we're going to challenge that assumption completely. Because the source material we're looking at today isn't a manifesto.
No, it's not.
It isn't a lecture series either. It is literally a romantic comedy from 2010.
And not even, some critically acclaimed indie masterpiece that swept the Oscars. We are talking about the movie Letters to Juliet.
Starring Amanda Seyfried and Vanessa Redgrave.
Yeah.
Which is a movie most people would probably just categorize as a comfort watch for a rainy Sunday afternoon.
Oh, no way.
But our source today, this reflection piece titled Letters to Juliet, written by Cricket Fox, she argues that this specific film was the primary catalyst for a massive professional pivot.
Right.
A pivot that took her from having absolutely zero audience to ranking in the top 3.5% of podcasts globally.
Which is just a fascinating
Good.
case study in receptivity. I mean,
Yeah.
It really suggests that inspiration doesn't care about the prestige of the medium you're consuming. It just strikes when you are ready to hear it.
Exactly. So before we get into the how, and I definitely want to dig into how she actually built that audience later, let's look at the what. Let's set the stage.
Sure.
As I mentioned, the piece is by Cricket Fox. And for context, she is the creator behind the brand This is Cricket's Coffee. And she's the host of the podcast Corner Coffee with Cricket.
Right. And her central thesis right out of the gate is about the specific category of film that she calls the hidden gem.
Which we should probably define. Because when I hear hidden gem, I just think of, a movie that the studio didn't give a big enough marketing budget to.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. But she frames it a lot more poetically than that. She describes these hidden gems as films that are simple, maybe not known to the massive mainstream audiences, but they possess this specific quality that just speaks to you.
Mm-hmm.
She says they change you without you even realizing it's happening. It's really the difference between a movie you admire for the cinematography or craft and a movie you kind of just inhabit for how it makes you feel.
Yeah, she mentions it's her go-to for cheering up or escaping. But as you read through her reflection, it becomes really clear she wasn't just watching Letters to Juliet for the romance plot.
Not at all.
She was really zeroing in on a very specific dynamic between the characters.
This is where the analysis gets pretty psychological. She focuses heavily on the relationship between the two female leads. So you have Sophie, who is this young fact-checker and aspiring writer.
Played by Amanda Seyfried.
Right. And then you have Claire, the older British woman who is searching for her lost love.
Played by the incredible Vanessa Redgrave.
Yes. But Fox notes something really crucial about their dynamic. She points out that Claire essentially becomes the mother Sophie never had.
Oh, right.
And this isn't just a casual observation about the plot. This touches a very personal wound for Fox.
Yeah, this part of the source material was surprisingly vulnerable. I wasn't expecting it. She mentions that she is adopted, and she actually admits that when she watches Claire and Sophie interact on screen, she feels this pang of missing those specific, intimate mother-daughter moments.
And that vulnerability is the whole key to this. That is why the movie stopped being just mild entertainment for her.
Because it became personal.
Exactly. When you see your own emotional deficits played out on a screen, the things you really yearn for in your own life, your brain sort of stops processing it as fiction.
Wow.
It starts processing it as a possibility, which explains why this film, out of all the films out there, became her catalyst. It hit a nerve that was already totally exposed.
So because she was already emotionally hooked by that relationship, she was completely open to the central plot device of the movie, which is honestly a bit fantastical.
Oh, it's very fantastical. So the premise is Sophie finds a letter hidden behind a loose brick at Juliet's house in Verona. But the letter isn't new. It was actually written by Claire 50 years ago.
50 years.
Yeah. And Sophie, who is basically the driving force of the movie, decides to write back to this 50-year-old letter.
Which is just a terrifying amount of time to leave a question unanswered.
Yeah.
Half a century.
It really is. And that brings us to the core philosophy of this whole discussion. Fox actually does this fascinating linguistic breakdown of the phrase that drives that entire narrative. The phrase, what if?
Right. Now, what if is a phrase we hear all the time.
Constantly.
It's on inspirational posters, it's in car commercials, it can feel a little bit cliche. But Fox argues there is something structural about those two specific words that creates a profound psychological spiral.
It's all about the combination. She points out that separately, what and if are totally innocuous.
Just simple words.
Just simple, functional words. But the moment you fuse them together, you basically create a split in reality.
Yeah.
You're no longer looking at what actually is. You are forced to look at what could be.
Or what could have been, which is the darker side of it.
Precisely. And that is the double-edged sword she talks about. In her piece, Fox identifies two distinct flavors of what if. You've got the forward-looking, exciting version, like, what if I start this podcast? What if I move to a new city?
The fun kind.
Right.
Yeah.
But then there's the backward-looking, haunting version.
The regret factor.
Yes. And she lists some specific examples that hit really hard. Things like, what if I had just reached out?
Oh, man.
Or what if I had just said, I value you before it was too late?
That second one, before it's too late, that connects directly back to Claire waiting 50 years in the movie. It seems like the film served as a giant flashing warning sign for Fox.
It creates this massive sense of urgency. She calls this combination of words a terrifying, beautiful courage.
I love that phrase. Terrifying, beautiful courage.
It really captures it. It's beautiful because it implies hope. But it's terrifying because it implies agency. If you start asking what if, you are essentially admitting that you have the power to change the outcome.
Right.
And if you have the power to change it, you also carry the responsibility if you choose not to do anything.
Which is a really heavy realization to have while you're just sitting on the couch eating popcorn on a Tuesday night.
Definitely.
But here is the thing that often happens with those kinds of late night realizations. We have them, we feel this huge surge of motivation, maybe we buy a domain name or write a to-do list.
And then do absolutely nothing.
Exactly. We toss it into the idea graveyard. But Cricket Fox didn't stay in the graveyard. However, and I think this is arguably the most important part of her timeline, she didn't jump immediately either.
No, she didn't. And I'm really glad you brought up the timeline here because it totally disrupts that overnight success myth we all love to buy into.
Right.
Fox wrote this initial reflection, this whole I need to change piece about the movie, in 2019.
2019.
But she didn't actually sit down in her space, which she calls her den, and hit record on her podcast until 2021.
That is a full 2-year gap. 2 years of just staring at the what if.
It's the incubation gap. It's that awful space between identifying what you desire and actually summoning the courage to execute on it. And honestly, I think a lot of people listening to this deep dive are probably sitting in that exact gap right now.
Oh, for sure.
They know what they want to do. They have their own letters to Juliet inspiration, but they just haven't written the letter back yet.
So what finally broke that paralysis for her? Because going from writing a blog post or an essay to launching a podcast, that's a huge shift in media. You are literally having to find and use your physical voice.
She describes it as a very nervous start. And this is where the real reality check comes into play. She finally launches Corner Coffee with Cricket in 2021. She puts it out into the world. And the response...
I remember reading this part. She says she reached 16 people on Spotify.
16.
That is incredibly humble.
It's basically silence.
Yeah, it's like talking to your mom and maybe a few close friends who just felt obligated to click the link you sent them.
Right. And this is the exact moment where 90% of creative projects just die. You do the scary thing, you face the terrifying courage, and the world responds with a total shrug. You get 16 listeners. The what if basically turns into so what?
Right. Why even bother? But she kept going. And this is where the data in the source material gets super interesting. We are looking at this case study from the vantage point of 5 years after that initial 2019 realization. Where does the show stand now?
That same show, the one that started with 16 pity listens, is now ranking in the top 3.5% of all podcasts globally.
I really want to pause on that stat for a second so you as the listener can appreciate it. Top 3.5%. In the podcasting space, that is rarefied air. That's not just doing okay as a hobby. That is serious, undeniable traction.
It really is. It means she's outperforming millions of other active shows. And the natural question is, how did she do it? Did she have some viral clip on TikTok? Did a massive celebrity retweet her show?
And the source material doesn't mention any viral explosion or luck like that. Instead, Fox uses this very specific, almost tactile metaphor to describe her process. She talks about stitching.
Stitching her story together, row by row, episode by episode.
I just love that imagery. Because stitching is slow, it's tedious work, it's these tiny, small movements repeated thousands of times.
It is the exact opposite of taking a leap. We also talk about taking a leap of faith, which sounds so dramatic and instant. You jump and you're there. But stitching is methodical.
Right.
It implies that she didn't focus on getting to that top 3.5% ranking. She just focused on the next row, the next single episode.
It's the difference between just wanting a finished quilt to keep you warm and actually being willing to sit there and thread the needle every single day.
Exactly. And her key insight from enduring that process is so profound. She writes that the world actually stops to listen when you stop wondering and start stitching. There is something about the pure consistency of action that commands attention in a way that just having good ideas never will.
It's almost like the universe or even just the Spotify algorithm can somehow smell the commitment.
Or maybe it's just that by showing up row by row, she naturally got better at it. She found her rhythm. She built a real relationship with her audience that eventually went way beyond those initial 16 people. She basically proved to them she wasn't going to quit.
It's total validation of playing the long game. But I actually want to bring it back to the movie for a second here, because Fox draws a really brilliant parallel between her own creative journey and the characters in the film, specifically regarding this concept of the comfort zone.
Yes. Now, the comfort zone is a term we hear in self-help circles ad nauseum, but the movie visualizes it so perfectly. For Claire, the older character, her comfort zone was her very quiet life back in England. It was safe. It was entirely predictable, and it was completely devoid of the love she lost.
And for Sophie.
Well, her comfort zone was her job being a fact checker, literally just verifying other people's words instead of ever writing her own.
Oof. That cuts pretty deep, verifying other people's words. That is such a safe, comfortable place to hide if you're afraid of being a creator.
It really is. And for Cricket Fox, her comfort zone was probably just writing her blog, staying safely behind the text on a screen. Recording audio, actually putting her real voice into the ears of absolute strangers, that was her personal version of traveling to Verona.
And the source argues that the exact thing you are desperately looking for is almost always located geographically or metaphorically way outside that zone.
It mathematically has to be. I mean, if it were inside your comfort zone, you would already possess it.
Right, obviously.
The very fact that you want it implies it is currently out of your reach.
Yeah.
You have to travel to go get it.
But traveling is dangerous. Or at least our brains tell us it feels dangerous.
Which is exactly why Fox issues a warning in her piece. And I think this is so important because we so often frame these follow your dreams type stories as purely positive and uplifting.
All sunshine and rainbows.
Right. But she actually includes a threat here.
The threat of the alternative.
Yes. She writes directly to the reader, don't spend the rest of your life wondering, what if?
And that brings us right back to the 50 years of waiting.
It does. The pain of that nervous start, the total embarrassment of having only 16 people listen to your passion project, that pain is acute. It stings a lot in the moment, but it heals over time.
Right.
But the pain of wondering what if is chronic. It never actually goes away. It just sits there like a sealed letter hidden in a wall for 50 years.
I think that is the real kicker here. We are so terrified of the short-term failure, we're so afraid of the 16 listeners, that we subconsciously choose the chronic pain of regret instead.
Because the regret is a lot quieter, at least at first. Failure is loud in public. But Fox's trajectory absolutely proves that if you can just endure that quiet, embarrassing beginning and just keep stitching anyway, the what if eventually transforms into what is.
So we have this really incredible journey mapped out. We have the spark, which is just watching the movie Letters to Juliet. We have the paralysis, those 2 full years of just thinking about it.
The incubation.
Right. Then we have the action, which was her nervous start. And finally, we have the result, hitting that top 3.5%.
It's a complete, beautiful arc. And I think it really validates the idea that art, even everyday pop culture, is a legitimate tool. We really shouldn't look down on it. If a simple movie makes you cry or feel a deep sense of longing, that is valuable data. That is your own subconscious trying to tell you what you are missing in your real life.
It's so interesting you say that. It makes me wonder how many people are constantly dismissing their own letters to Juliet moments just because they think the source material isn't serious enough to act on. They tell themselves, oh, it's just a catchy song, or it's just some silly beach novel.
But if it moves you, it's serious. Cricket Fox didn't dismiss it. She fully leaned into it. She let a fictional story rewrite her actual reality.
So to bring it all together, what is the core actionable advice here for you, the listener, especially if you realize you are currently stuck in that 2019 to 2021 gap?
The advice from the source is incredibly direct. Follow your heart. Have the actual courage to follow through on it and seize the moment.
Which, I'll be honest, sounds exactly like a greeting card until you see the actual math and the timeline behind it.
Right. Seize the moment is a total cliche. But seize the moment, endure 2 years of fear, broadcast to absolutely nobody, and just keep going until you win. That is a strategy.
I really like that distinction. It's not just about the bravado of the start. It is entirely about the endurance of the middle.
And realizing that the hidden gem you were looking for is more than likely the very thing you were terrified to start.
You know, it's funny, we started this deep dive talking about whether anyone should ever take serious life advice from a 2010 rom-com. And I think the answer is a resounding yes, provided you are actually willing to do the hard work that comes after the credits roll.
Exactly. The movie ends with a kiss and a nice soundtrack. The real-life story begins with the work.
Yeah.
That is the fundamental difference. Fox took the feeling from the movie and applied the relentless work of the podcast.
Row by row.
Episode by episode.
Before we wrap up today, I want to leave you with something to chew on. We've spent this whole time talking about Cricket Fox's catalyst, but what about yours?
That is the big question.
Think about the everyday media you consume. Is there a book you find yourself rereading every single year? A random movie scene you watch on YouTube whenever you're feeling stuck? Or maybe a song that just makes you feel incredibly restless?
Pay attention to that, because that restlessness is a signal.
Exactly. The source suggests that these simple things change us without us even realizing it's happening. So what influences in your life right now are nudging you toward a what-if moment that you are currently ignoring?
Because if a 2010 Amanda Seyfried movie can launch a globally ranked media brand,
Then just imagine what that crazy idea you've been sitting on could actually do if you finally decided to write back.
it's time to find the letter in the wall.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you next time.
As we wrap up our time in Verona today, I'm left thinking about that famous balcony, not just as a place for star-crossed lovers, but as a vantage point. We all have our own version of that balcony. Sometimes we're looking out, wondering about those two little words, what and if. On their own, they're harmless. But when you put them together, they can keep you from ever stepping off the ledge and into the story you're meant to live. So, as you finish your coffee today, maybe leave the what-ifs behind on the balcony and choose to just be. Until next time, on behalf of Cricket, this is Ava. Stay safe in your world and we'll talk soon.